versus the prophets of Baal. He is a 9th century prophet, BC. And like Moses, he's super important to people, right? He's considered one of the most important figures in Israel's history. And it's not just in the Jewish tradition. He is lifted up in all of the Abrahamic faiths as one of the most important patriarchs. The Muslims, the Jews, the Christians, we hold Elijah dear. There are written texts in, of course, the Bible and the Quran, but also folklore texts about Elijah. There's tons written about him. And in these stories, he might kind of remind you of a superhero at times. Like just in our text, in the Old Testament, we have stories of Elijah being able to run distances that should, like in a matter of hours, that should take weeks, right? He was able to call fire down from the heavens. He could raise people from the dead. And all of this he was able to do not because of his own ability and his own strength and power, but because of the power of God. All of that was given to him because of his faithfulness and his calling and his relationship with God. In our story today, we hear about the death of Elijah. It's a strange and somewhat difficult story. Similar to the other stories of Elijah, we have some very kind of odd things taking place. So the idea is, the tradition is that Elijah never actually died. But while he was walking with Elisha, that the chariots of fire and horsemen swooped down from the heavens, picked Elijah up, and carried him off to the heavens where God would be sitting. Elijah never actually had to die. And this is something that, this is one of those things that kind of sets him apart. It's one of the reasons that he's lifted up in certain ways, and some traditions thought that he would come back before the Messiah did. They're really odd stories, right? It's unusual, it's apocalyptic, but as cool as that part is, as interesting as that part is, I don't really think it's the point of the story. And we can have the debate about these strange apocalyptic texts and their validity. But again, I don't think that that's really the point. This is a very well-written story. And because of that, it's multifaceted. There's a lot that we can pull from it. And so today, the thing I'm going to pull from it is one way that the Christian church has historically used this story. And we have used it when we talk about mentors or when we talk about discipleship. This relationship between Elijah, the teacher, and Elisha, the student. The prophet Elijah had this student that followed him, and the student was expected to one day take his place. Elisha, the student, was a son of farmers, though he was called to the prophetic life. And we don't hear much about him after his calling. Like Elijah is literally like walking one day. God says, see that guy? Go throw your mantle, your cloak around him and claim him. And then we don't really hear about Elisha again until this story. But we know, according to tradition, that Elisha would have walked alongside Elijah for most of both of their ministries. That through all of the other stories that we read, Elisha would have been there in the background and probably in the evenings deconstructing with his mentor what had happened and taken place. So Elisha, the student, worked next to Elijah, the teacher. Elisha studied and supported Elijah's work, all with the understanding that one day he would take the place of his prophetic teacher. The Jewish tradition continued to use this model of teaching and of mentoring. It's the same model, very similar to the one that Jesus used, where he called his disciples, as he, the rabbi, and they as the disciples, and they would follow him. And one day, they would be expected to be able to do what Jesus did, to teach the way that Jesus taught, to interpret the text the same way. Also in the Christian church and in the United Methodist Church, we carry this tradition still. I have had many mentors, some official and some unofficial. Of the official kind, I'm actually required to have these mentors through the whole ordination process and sometimes even past. And that whole process is overseen by our conference. But whether official or not, I am accountable to every mentor that I have ever crossed paths with. I'm expected to have meetings and check-ins. When they suggest books, I read them. When they tell me to pray, I pray. And when they offer me advice, I listen. Even when I don't agree, sometimes especially when I don't agree. And I've had some very impressive mentors, some well-known with big names, others that weren't really well-known, but being in their presence, you could just tell that they were consumed with the peace and love of Christ in ways that were almost intimidating, the kind of humble that would just pour off of them. And for all of these mentors, when I'd ask them where their gifts came from or how they got so good at what they did, they always gave me the same response. To God be the glory. Oh, and practice. You have to practice a lot. Practice is a big part of it. And when a student takes the place of the teacher, when one generation hands the mantle over to the next, there is an excitement and there is a joy. But there is also, inevitably, issues that may arise, complications, let's say. So I want to look at the story about the passing of the mantle from one generation to the next from two perspectives. I want to look at it from the perspective of the student and also from the perspective of the teacher, humbly admitting that at any given stage of my ministry, I am both. So we meet Elijah and Elisha as they are traveling. And every step of the way, Elijah, the teacher, keeps telling his student to leave his side. He's like, you can go, it's okay, you can go. And the student refuses. He's like, no, I promised I'd be in this long haul. Where you go, I go. And they get to the River Jordan. And Elijah, the one with these like superhero powers, right? Elijah takes off his mantle, which is just kind of like a cloak, and he rolls it up, and he strikes the Jordan River with it, and the Jordan parts. And Elijah and Elisha cross on dry land. If this is reminding you of the story of Moses and the Red Sea, you are doing the right kind of thinking here. This is kind of a way to give Elijah more validity. And so they cross on dry land. And then they begin their very last conversation that they'll have together. When I imagine this part, the last conversation that takes place between the teacher and the student, the mentor and the mentee, I am reminded of many kung fu movies where you've got like the old master who's like, ready to pass on the last move to the young student, except like it's placed in Eastern like surroundings and not, yeah. So that's how I see it, a Middle Eastern kung fu movie. And they're in this like sincere moment, and Elijah, the teacher, says to Elisha, is there one last thing that I can do before I am taken from you? And Elisha says, I would like a double share of your spirit. I imagine Elisha's like on the verge of tears here. And at this point, at this request, that his wise old teacher kind of chuckles a little and says, you've asked a really hard thing. But here's the deal. If you see me being taken from you, then yes, you can have this thing that you've asked for. And so they continue walking. And all of a sudden, a chariot of fire and horsemen come between them and separate them. And Elijah is scooped up and taken to the heavens. And Elisha, the student, sees all of it. And like that, his mentor is gone. And he weeps, and he weeps, and he tears his clothes in half. That is a sign of mourning in this time period. I imagine all the things that were going through his mind. And then he sees that Elijah's mantle has fallen back to the earth. And so he walks, and he picks it up, and he rolls it up, and he goes back to the river Jordan, and he says, "Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" And he strikes the water, and the waters are parted. And it is confirmed to him that he has truly received that portion, that he has truly become the teacher. And that is such a great story. I know that a lot of people don't like the Old Testament, but it's just filled with these kind of things. So let's look at this passing of the mantle from our two different perspectives. I want to start with the student. What it must have been like for Elisha when his teacher gets taken away from him. When it's like his turn to lead, you know? Okay, so first of all, Elisha was given no promise that he would succeed. He even asked his mentor on his mentor's deathbed, essentially, like, "Am I going to make it?" And the guy's like, "We'll see, won't we?" Not exactly the words of comfort that one might be looking for in that situation. But there's this great truth to this, right? When we pass our knowledge on, we don't know what's going to stick, right? Or what's going to work. If our belief in the student alone and our love for them was enough, then none of us would ever fear for our children's safety or worry about any younger person or any student that we know. But our belief and our love isn't enough, right? There has to be a response on their part. And so we can't guarantee the success of others, even if we want to. So, do you think that made Elisha feel ill-equipped? I mean, I do. I don't know that he was really feeling secure that he'd be ready to be the next leader, right? He doesn't even have time to mourn his friend. He's going to be expected to step into leadership very quickly. There are 50 other prophets who he will be leading within a mile away. And it's not like he's following some third string act here, okay? He was following Elijah the Great. How do you follow an act like that? Elisha had to find the faith in God and in himself, all on his own. And there's other reasons that Elisha might struggle with this, right? Why a mentee might struggle with the lessons of their mentor. For example, let's be real. There had to be times when Elisha, as a student, disagreed with his mentor's methods. Every generation does things differently. Am I right? Yeah. Sometimes we don't like the way that looks, do we? They're always on their phones. I don't understand. Right? The use of technology, the way that they build their ethics and their values. They do things differently. But this is how our growth takes place. We're never carbon copies of our teachers or those who walked before us, right? So the teachers just try to do their best to give the lessons, and we hope that the students apply it to the best of their ability. Each generation takes those lessons and experiences and applies them in new ways, appropriate to the context of that day and that place and that time and those people. And sometimes this upsets others, right? When the new young guard comes up and tries to do something a new way, go to any young clergy person's conference, and I guarantee these are the stories that you will hear. We've got, there's always this like, we've never done it that way before brigade in every church. They always show up. It's like, we want our church to grow and to do new things, but we don't really want to do anything differently, which doesn't work, okay? It can't. It can't work like that. And I'm sure it's like this in every field. You've held on to one method, one way of doing something, and the next people that come up say that that method might not be the right method. And so Elisha, as the student, had to have some of his own doubts about the ways that he saw the world differently. I mean, again, he's dealing with Elijah, the great, the powerful. It's okay. It's okay that each generation constructs things differently. The way that they use communication and the way that they build their morals and ethics. It's supposed to be this way. Teachers and mentors are not called to make cheerleaders for their own game who sit on the sidelines. No, we are called to equip and empower and to then watch the students take off in their own way as we observe the next generation to whom we pass the mantle. So let's talk about this from the perspective of the teacher, of Elijah. You think there were times that Elijah didn't want to let go? In our text today, we read verses 1, 2, and then 6 through 14. The lectionary left out 4 verses, and it's because it's just very repetitive. Elijah keeps telling Elisha, maybe you should just go. Maybe you should just go. Maybe you're not quite ready for what's about to happen. He wasn't sure. He wasn't sure if Elisha was going to be able to step up, right? Is there a chance that Elijah wasn't feeling ready to let go of his own ministry, of his own life, of his own job? That retirement came and it was like, nah, I don't know if today's the day. Let's wait another 2 years. That's okay. It's a very familiar feeling to a lot of us in transition, right? Elijah, as the teacher, is now being asked to let go of control and to trust Elisha and to trust God. Now, trusting God might be easy, but Elijah has seen the mistakes of Elisha, right? Right? When you've been the mentor, he remembers when Elisha was wet behind the ears and probably did some terrible, terrible things. I hope that you can relate to this, because I relate to this greatly. When I look back on my own life and my career and my ministry, I am astounded that people ever gave me the amount of power and control that they did. I'm like, what were they thinking? I was so young. And I made so many mistakes. I was such a newbie. And yet, I've learned that it wasn't always easy for people to give me that power and to let go of the control, right? Those people understood that the trust was necessary. And yeah, those people trusted me. But more, over the years, I realized that they really trusted God. And they trusted this process. They trusted this multi-generational system of passing the mantle from one to the next, of the way that we nurture each other, and the way we grow the church. They understood that this very pattern was going to test them and push them into new spaces. And there would be times where they would be the one challenging the system, and then there would be times when they were the system. Because God is always doing a new thing, right? So they were wise enough to go with it and wise enough to know when to tell me to stop. I spent the last 2 weeks thinking a lot about mentors and mentoring. You guys met Anthony today. We hired these 4 young interns to help lead the young adult ministry. And I have found myself learning a great deal from this experience where I'm sitting kind of in a space where I'm being mentored to, where I'm also mentoring. And it's been very eye-opening. And I keep coming back to the same questions. Are we ready to let Elisha lead? Are we equipping our Elishas? From 2 years old to 80 years old, like the people that want to try new ministries, to start new things, right? The people that are really willing to put themselves out there and do something new. Do we trust God? Do we trust them? Can we trust the wisdom that our mentors handed us when handling this? You know, there's a lot of ways that we equip and we teach. We all just made a promise to a little girl named Molly. If you read along with the liturgy, you made a promise when that water touched her that you would help teach Sunday school, that you would help support the value and ethics system that she will build, that you will help her know God and forgiveness in all that she does. For each and every one of you that give your heart to a ministry here at this church, as you interact with other people, you are part of this process. And if you stick with that ministry for a while, you will find yourself moving from being the Elisha to being the Elijah. And at those moments, what are we thinking about? Where are we putting our faith and our trust? Is it in ourselves? Is it in the system? Is it in God? Maybe a combination? These are really important questions for us, because there will come a day when I am gone, when the chariot will swing low and claim another daughter to the heavens. And when the mantle falls back to the earth, will there be a young person waiting there? A young person who most likely agreed with almost all of my methods, had different ethics and values that I do, and who is a completely different person from a completely different context? And when the mantle falls to the earth, will they know and believe that they are more than equipped to pick it up and travel on, and to continue the ministry of the generations before them, calling out to the one true Lord, the God of Elijah? I'd like to think so. Amen.